Back on America's Forum, and we welcome in now General Michael Hayden, former director of the NSA and the CIA, and currently a principal at the Chertoff Group. General, we heard from Eric Holder there, who was in Paris, but he was not part of the Unity rally, nor was the Vice President, or the Secretary of State, or the President. Our ambassador was there. In retrospect, was that a mistake not to have the President or some other notable cabinet official in attendance there at the Paris Unity rally?
Yeah, JD, I think it was a mistake, and frankly, maybe more important than that, it was an opportunity lost. It was an opportunity to show that this fight against Muslim extremism was a unified fight in the West, and that the Americans, who have been kind of singled out for some of the actions we've taken, are actually part of a much broader front. What a visual, JD. We've seen a very senior American official arm in arm with the kinds of leaders that were there yesterday. Opportunity lost.
General, the White House has announced a terrorism summit in February. Do you think this is an effective way to deal with this problem?
Well, Miranda, it won't hurt, but, calling a meeting is hardly ever the solution to a challenge.
So
I mean,
what do you believe is?
Dialogue, if it fosters some new ideas and continues enthusiasm to focus on the issue, that's all good. But maybe I'd give it a grade as necessary, but far from sufficient.
But General, you said it's probably not the best solution. So what would you suggest, given your background?
We need some concrete steps, and frankly, Miranda, I'm going to kind of come back to things JD and I talked about 6, 9, 12, 15 months ago, and that's frankly, what is it you want the government to do, and what is it you will allow the government to do now to keep you safe? I made the comment last week at the height of the crisis in Paris that all that metadata that NSA was collecting and seemed to frighten a lot of people in the last year or so, right now it doesn't look like the scariest thing in the room, does it? And so we need to address in an adult way the concrete things, like the extension of the Patriot Act, which will expire in June of this year.
Michael, the attacks last week carried out by French citizens, at least in the case of the brothers, who were able to travel to Yemen for training and then return to France and engage in those acts of terror. Do you believe these men conceivably could have gotten visas into America? How bad is our problem with visas, and who is currently coming into the United States?
Well, the good news is the two brothers were long known to us, back about a decade, JD, and they were on the no-fly list. And so one expects they would not have been able to travel to this country. But when you look at the performance of the French service, let me be very clear. The French were really good at this. All right? They were a wonderful counterterrorism partner. They were focused, and they were confident. And I think what we saw here wasn't incompetence on the part of DGSC or DST, but it was simply a reflection of the size of the problem. And they don't have sufficient resources to deal with it.
General, with only 30 seconds remaining, you mentioned, JD mentioned visas. How concerned are you about the vulnerability of the visa waiver program?
Well, I saw Senator Feinstein yesterday comment that she thought it was our Achilles heel. I don't know if I'd go that strongly, but it does make our frontier the border of some countries in Europe rather than the Atlantic or Pacific coast of the United States. In other words, if a wannabe enemy gets into those countries in Europe, it's almost getting here already. And that is cause for concern.
And we take note of those concerns. We also take note of the fact that we will continue our conversation with General Hayden following this break. There's more with Michael Hayden as America's Forum continues here on Newsmax TV. Stay tuned. Let's continue our conversation with General Michael Hayden, the former director of the National Security Agency, the Central Intelligence Agency, and currently a principal at the Chertoff Group. Mike, what did you make of the Egyptian president's statement about a reformation of Islam?
It was a remarkable performance, JD, and very impressive. And I associate myself with the remarks of Mr. Will. Shows great bravery. In fact, Sadat wasn't just killed by any terrorist. He was killed by the Egyptian Islamic Jihad, which is one of the founding members under Ayman al-Zawahiri of al-Qaeda itself. This goes back to the very roots of this problem. Now, I frankly have been a bit uncomfortable with el-Sisi's authoritarian strain. He's put a lot of journalists in jail, for example. But he is a man of faith. He is a practicing Muslim. And here is someone who is both Islamic and modern. And he's challenging his faith to reconcile itself with the modern world. Frankly, JD, that's what we've been waiting for 13 years. We can kill our way out of immediate problems in terms of people already convinced they want to come do us harm. But the production rate of those kinds of people seems to be unabated, and it will remain unabated until Islam resolves some questions within itself. So God bless, Allah bless President al-Sisi.
General, I want to talk about another story that also made headlines last week, and that was the potential slaughter of 2,000 Nigerians at the hands of Boko Haram. We now know that the terrorist group strapped a bomb to a 10-year-old girl that exploded in a busy market, killing 20 people. Do you think this group is becoming a bigger threat, like ISIS and al-Qaeda?
In a different way. In a different way, Miranda.
How so?
It's a bigger threat. It's a bigger threat in Nigeria. This is a group that doesn't yet have regional ambitions or regional capabilities, let alone global ambitions and global capabilities. I mean, it's awful. The death of Nigerians is as bad as the death of Frenchmen. But that the French attacks were carried out by an al-Qaeda group that has already made its intentions clear that it wants to reach globally. Boko Haram isn't in that league yet. Doesn't mean they're not dangerous. Doesn't mean we might not want to be a bit more active against them. But it's a different kind of threat right now.
And yet, Mike, and we've got about a minute left, Boko Haram, let's face it, that story was essentially buried last week. But if Boko Haram killed 2,000, does comparative inaction from the international community only embolden that group?
It lets them think as if they can do this with impunity. I don't think it encourages them to do more of it. They don't need any further encouragement. As you and Miranda have already pointed out, they're just plain awful. I'd be a little reluctant to put an American face on trying to suppress them right now, because that might motivate them to target Americans. But your choice of words, JD, I think was really quite good. And international response to this kind of threat, I think, is well indicated. The only long pole in the tent is that response would have to be through the Nigerian government, which is hopelessly corrupt and incompetent.
On that note, we will thank you, General Michael Hayden, for your time, for your insights, and as always, we appreciate what you have to say. Look forward to having you back again real soon. Now, as so often is the case, stories in the news are viewed through a political prism. Coming up, Javier Manhattas on the right and Ari Ravenhoff on the left. There's more straight ahead.